Welcome back, friends. Lisa Laker here with another tutorial. Today we're doing a winter scene with some birch trees. So the way that we're going to do this is we're actually going to paint the background color on, and then we're going to soak up some of that paint where the trees are. The paint colors that we're using are, Winsor Newton colors, black, cadmium red, indigo, and manganese blue. And then I've got my go-to brushes here, my number 4 and my number 12 Princeton Neptune round brushes. So let's get started. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and wet the paper down. And depending on what size you're doing, this is just a small 5x7. Will depend on how much water you need. And you're just gonna go down about 3/4 of the page. You can see, you might be able to see the little line that I drew. And then we're gonna go ahead and make a puddle of the colors that we want. I always let all my paint dry. This one's loose somehow. So I put a little puddle on there, and then I just work it to get all the pigment into that water, and then you can squeegee the water into your palette here. And then depending on how thick you want it or how dark you want it, depends on how much color or how much water you want. So test it on a piece of scrap paper. And then it will be a little bit lighter than that because the paper's wet, so it's going to absorb in a little bit more. And as it dries, it lightens up. So again, here's how light mine is. I've done this tutorial with a larger class, and I did it a larger scale with darker colors, and I used teal and red instead of blue and red. I had a lady use orange and teal. I had one use purple and teal. So you can get creative with the background colors. By all means, do what you like. I'm pretty happy with that. I might add just a little bit more water to it. And then on the same palette, I'm also going to go ahead and mix my red color. So rinse your brush really well. Dig in, get that pigment loose, and then squeegee it over. Or squeeze it out of your brush, and so shouldn't say squeegee. Alright, and I'm probably going to want that just a little bit more watered down because I want it to be more pink than red. And again, as it dries, it does get a little bit lighter. Now you can see we're using a wet on wet technique here. So when you wet your paper, my brush is not cleaned out, but that would normally be clear, and add the color to it. Those colors bleed together, and that's what gives you the softer look. And then when we go back through, we can harden up and crispen some of those lines to make it look like background trees and snowbanks and grass and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get that painted on, and just do it kind of randomly. Oh, I got my blue too watery, so I'm just going to go in and mix it a little bit darker. There we go. And rinse your brush if you hit that other color. Otherwise, that other color will completely take over your entire painting. And the trick to this is you can't let it dry. So this isn't something that you're gonna sit down and do one color and then go get a cup of coffee and come back. This has to be wet the entire time we do the background. Now we'll go in a little bit later and we'll crispen up a little bit of the areas, and that at that point we need it dry. But make sure that you're able to work pretty quickly here. And if you're brand new to watercolor, test this out on a scrap page. And where some of those colors are running together, it turns a little bit of a purpley gray. I kind of like that. Okay. And now I'm going to dry my brush and just move that color just a little bit more. I want to add a little bit more blue up top here. The other reason we wet the paper first in this case is so that the color doesn't dry very quickly, because we want to keep this paper wet long enough to soak it off of the birch trees. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now I've got my brush rinsed and dry, and now I'm going to drag it down and rinse to start pulling that color off. You want your brush dry, or as dry as you can possibly get it. But just keep pulling that color off and rinsing your brush as you do it. Okay, now the paper's still wet. We got it all cleaned off, and now this line down here, I'm just going to run my brush across it just so that we don't have the streaks. And then push some of that color up and make just odd shapes with it. Let the water puddle. Oh, sorry, my light just went off. Just a second here. You want a few peaks, and then again, those two colors make kind of a purpley gray. At this point, you could, to get some of those hard lines, we could add just a little bit of a black, a very watered down black mixture. So literally this much. And I'm actually just going to mix it in with the blue that I have left here. And that should be watery enough. Yeah, that's good. And now you can just stipple some of that in. And then as that dries, as we've pulled all the water off of the trees, it won't run into those trees. And then the paper's starting to dry. So we're going to leave it just like that. And I'm going to drag a little bit of that down too. Just get a little sloppy with the brush. Okay. And then next we're going to let it dry. Okay, and now that it's dry, I'm going to go ahead and mix up with my small brush this time a little bit of the black, and I want it to be just a little bit darker than what we just did. About I want to go a little bit lighter, so I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. I think that'll probably be good. Yep, that's good. And now I'm going to run a very quick streak just down the left side of each of the trees. If you get too much water on your brush, you won't be able to control it, so blot it. And then right at the base of the tree where the shadow ends, you can do the same thing and add just a little bit of water just to fade that out a little bit. And then we're gonna let that dry. And before I do the bark, I wanna go just a little bit darker with the background because my blue kind of washed out. I watered it down just a little bit too much. So I'm happy with the red, but I wanna do a little bit more of the blue. And this time, obviously, I have to be careful not to hit the tree because I don't want to wash the whole paper out. I just want to deepen the blue in a few of the areas. And now I'm just going to use just water in my brush to spread that out. And if you're doing this as well and you run it into your second color, to soften that line, add a stipple in just a little bit of your second color into the edge of it. Like right here, I'm just going to stipple literally just the tip of my brush and just dot some of that color in just to soften that back up. Okay, and now I'm going to go back in and gray some of that area right back up. And this is pretty dry now. And you can see how much water is on the paper. That's because this is a watercolor brush and it's meant to hold that much water. And I'm just going to drag some of that down. And I'm going to rinse and also drag some of that up. And now I'm satisfied with the background, so I'm going to let that dry and then we'll work on the bark. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is add a little bit of blue down here. And this is called wet on dry, where I'm just using the wet paint on the dry paper. And I just did one color and rinsed my brush, and now I'm just going to move that color with the side of my brush. You can see I'm holding it on the side. If I do this, it's going to get real streaky, but I just want to pull just so some of that color drags up, and now I'm missing some here, so I'm just going to stipple a little bit more in there. Okay, now I'm happy with it. Okay, now that my paper is nice and dry, I'm gonna go ahead with the small brush and I'm gonna mix a pretty thick black. Don't want it to be black, but I want it to be black. Does that make sense? So you can see how that soaks into the paper, and I think that'll work just fine. And now we're gonna go in, and I'm gonna add a little bit of blue to that color in a little bit. I think I want just a little more water. so that we have a little bit of variation in it. But now we're just going to go along the sides of the birch trees and add too much water in my brush, so I just blotted it, and now I'm pulling it up with my brush. And if you're not imaginative, you can pull up some birch trees images on your phone or on your computer and use those to kind of guide you with how much, or the placement, the shapes. I just kind of go with it because I've done birch trees a few times. And all the way up. Okay, now I'm going to go back in to these first few while it's still wet, and I'm going to just darken areas here and there. That second layer will just give it a little bit more dimension. And you don't have to hit every single one of them, just kind of randomly. And then I'm going to do the same with adding just a little bit of the blue, the indigo blue. Oh, I don't have it on this palette. And again, this is just giving you kind of a different color shadow. Just very random. Okay, and now we're going to add some branches. Let me show you the branches. They're just going to kind of come off the tree. I'm going to show you a very fun way to do that. So with the black and the blue that I already have mixed, we can draw a few. Just let your hand kind of shake and go off on its own. Okay, now we want to add a little bit of black and do some with the black. You could even just bump some of the branches. Maybe one's coming off the front here. This one goes off. And now I'm going to add just a tiny little drop of water, and the back of the brush we're going to use just to drag, because that'll make more of the twig effect, because that gets really, really tiny. And you do have to be very careful when you're using the brush. Sometimes learning to control it and not push down on the paper and make a really ridiculously thick line for something you want thin. I run my brush back and forth, and I hold very close to the bristles and go back and forth until the brush hits the paper. And then just be very careful when you're dragging your hand. I think all my branches kind of look the same, so I'm going to try to differentiate them just a little bit. I think we'll just drag that up. I'm just going to go in with a little bit more shadow because I feel like it got a little washed out in some areas. Okay. And then the last part and the most fun is splattering it, and that we're going to use the ink, the Winsor Newton white ink. Oh. And shake it up. Mine's getting pretty low. Wet brush. I've blotted it once, and now this gets tricky because sometimes it can come down in really big globs. So you want to practice before you throw it onto your paper, because once it's on, it's kind of on. And if you want bigger, use your bigger brush. Actually, I think I'm gonna throw a few bigger ones on there. There we go. And you can see how much water I have in my brush, that it kind of made a big puddle. But I'm okay with that. And now I'm going to do it the same with the red and the blue. So the puddle, I still have a puddle of red on here. And again, I'm going to test it. That's good. I'm going to water it down just a little bit more so that it doesn't come out so deep red. There we go. And more of kind of that pink. And then I'm going to do the same with the manganese blue. Okay. And then let that dry. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and sign it. Now, I like to use paint. If you've watched tutorials with me before, I just use my small brush and whatever color will blend into the background, and I do it again. I'm hold very close to the tip, and I slowly go down till my brush hits the paper, and then I throw my signature on there. And that completes it. If you like this tutorial, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up and follow me, and we can't wait to see you for the next video. Thanks for watching.